meeting in public of the Integrated Care Board for Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucester. Just a reminder to everybody online that it's being recorded. We are in public, and we've got 5 or 6 members of the public who've joined us for the meeting. So welcome to you. I hope you enjoy the discussion that will take place today. And what was an interesting day, of course, for us in the UK. And a reminder to those members of the public, again, it isn't a public meeting, but if you do have some questions, I will try and pick up those questions at the end if we have time, but I do need to get through the agenda of the board. So I've got some apologies. Dave Perry from South Gloucestershire, but Anne Clark is replacing Dave, so thanks, Anne. Joe Walker, I've got apologies from. I can't see Joe. She was with us this morning from North Somerset Council. Paul Martin from Bristol City.
Sorry, I'm here.
Oh, Joe, you're there.
Yeah,
you're looking a bit incognito.
I'm here, but I'm travelling, so I will be listening in and then joining more effectively in about half an hour.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks, Joe. That's great. Paul Martin, who's the interim chief exec from Bristol City Council, but Hugh is deputising for Paul today. Rosie Shepherd, our chief nurse, but I think Michael, who's her deputy, is probably joining with us. And then Dave Jarrett, who isn't with us, but he's got a number of deputies who will be coming in for the different agenda items that Dave has got as we go through. So I'm looking at Lucy or Lauren, really. Have we got any other apologies other than those I've just gone through?
No, no other apologies.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. So if I can move us on to declarations of interest. They're all listed and appended on your papers, but is there any declarations of interest anybody has that you haven't raised previously or relate to the items on the agenda today? No? Okay, thank you. So we got the minutes of our previous meeting. Is there any items of accuracy or any points anybody would like to raise in relation to those minutes? No? Okay, thanks. And then there was 2 actions arising. One, Sarah, I think you've put a fairly comprehensive update on the papers. So I think it's happy to close that one. There was also one on there about response to a member of the public's question.
And that, just to update, Jeff, so that response is nearly complete. We're just waiting for a response from a member of staff who's been on leave. So as soon as that's done, we'll be closing that. Thank you.
Okay, lovely. Thank you, Sarah. Any other comments in relation to the actions from our last meeting, or any points anyone would like to raise? No? Okay, brilliant. Thank you. So over to Shane then. Shane is our chief executive to provide an update on his position at the moment in the ICB and what's happening. So Shane, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues, as you know, I always like to just present the 3 big things. This obviously today, the public board meeting is slightly different because obviously we're still electoral purdah, and therefore the level of detail in my report is considerably less than it would have been normally. But I just want to bring to the attention that I think there are 3 big things just to bring to attention to the board. The first one is on the agenda today, which is the update on locality partnerships. We brought the locality partnership proposal to the ICP because it is an ICP review, not an ICB review. And that is on the agenda today, but I can't overstress how important locality partnerships are to us and getting them right for our system. So a lot of work's gone on in that space, and as I say, a full agenda item on today. People can explore that. The second big issue is, and you'll see from my report, is entitled Maintaining Focus and Oversight on Quality of Care and Experience of Pressurised Services. And this is really just to draw to the board's attention, and we'll do a lot more on this particular item, the importance of a letter that was received by chief executives of all ICBs, all trusts, ICP chair, regional directors and local authorities as well, just re-emphasising the importance of getting the balance between quality and safety, performance and money, and the importance in the urgent and emergency care space that we get that right. And in particular, two areas that we'll do a lot of work on into the future are bullet pointed in my report. That's about understanding the alternatives to emergency department attendances and admissions, and we're doing a lot in that space. And Ruth is on the call, is leading up on a lot of the work in that space. And then clearly, then the other angle is about how we maximise in-hospital flow as well. So, Chair, just for the board is aware, all chief executives and COOs are meeting tomorrow morning to discuss this letter in detail, to understand whether the actions we have in train at the moment are good enough and what other actions we need to put in place. And then the third big issue is obviously, as we discussed in the previous board meeting, the proposed collective action general practice, and just to make the board aware that the ballot has opened and closes on 29th of July, and that is to all GPs to understand whether they would wish to support collective action. So, Chair, as I say, it's a very short report this month. Happy to take questions as much as I can, given the day we're on. Over to you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. And understanding we're a period of purdah until 10 o'clock tonight. So it does restrict what we can discuss at meetings in public. But thank you. I think you've covered a fair bit of important stuff there. So any comments or questions for Shane on his update? No? Okay. Oh, John.
Sorry, thanks, Jeff. And Shane, not related to the content. I was just interested. I'm aware that you were at the NHS Confederation a week or so back, and Amanda Pritchard spoke about leadership development and kind of giving that a sort of more of a focus. I'm just interested in your initial thoughts on how that might apply sort of across BNSSG. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, John. And you are correct, actually, at the speech that Amanda Pritchard did give at the Confed, there was a lot of emphasis on the importance of professionalising management and respecting management in a health service, and referred back actually to the Messenger review, which would be about 18 months ago, probably even slightly longer than that, where it looked at, how would we improve management in the NHS? And I think there's something really important about that, about the investment that we an ICB, we a system, and we an overall healthcare places on management development, and also then the discussion about the regulated nature. Should managers be regulated, and should they? So I think it's a massive piece of work. It's certainly something that through our learning academy, we would really want to drive. How do we really drive leadership and management? And one of the comments that certainly was made at that speech, and has been made to me since by Amanda as well, is that we have a lot of great managers have become managers because they're great at what they do. They're a great podiatrist, a great physiotherapist, a great nurse, but then suddenly they find themselves and they're in management. And it's therefore, how do we put the structure around to give them the skills and the technique that they need to become a great manager? So I really hope this can be a major issue. And I know through Joe's office, through the academy, this is going to be a major piece of work for our system, John.
Thanks, Shane. John, really good question. Joe, I'm sure you want to come back in on that.
Yeah, thank you. So thank you, Shane. So just by way of, because there's always some useful sort of models and frameworks. So we are expecting a leadership competency framework, an NHS specifically focused one that will be lead at all levels from sort of line management up. So it's for the real opportunity to create sort of pathways and portfolios of development linked to both professional expertise and subject matter expertise, depending where individuals may come from. So that's going to be an important feature of our own people and culture plan. Obviously, the graduate scheme continues to be well regarded across the UK, I'm pleased to say. So we always are oversubscribed for GMTS, and we have engaged in that as a system as well as an ICB. And for the ICB in particular, we have our very first graduate that will and sponsored our very first graduate for an organisation our size. That is extremely useful. And also, just to make a point really with wider public sector leadership, because we are a system, and actually we do want to have an element of flow and an element of consistency consistency across our leadership, and we want to be able to demonstrate that in a system response as well as organisationally. So that's also part of that thinking and work. Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Joe.
Thank you both. Really well.
John, I mean, it is a good question and very timely because for the reasons Shane said around professionalising service, there's a real push from nationally around it. All the indications I had yesterday from the NHS in London was the emphasis will be more solidly around management than leadership. And that will bring with it some layers of bureaucracy. And I think you can see from all the press reporting why that might feel to be necessary. But I think for us as an ICB, really occupying that ground around leadership is still very important because, you know, I think we'll discuss it this afternoon and we discussed it this morning. The stuff we're talking about doing and the stuff we're doing for the benefit of our patients is because we're leading in a different way, not because we're managing the service in a different way. And so there's some subtleties around it, but I think Shane's absolutely right. You will see that we get quite a lot of requirements around management qualifications as we're going forward. Ellen.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. Shane, thanks for the update. Just to say, it's really reassuring that you're meeting with the CEOs tomorrow morning to assess whether and I would say significant amount of work that's been going on in the system to address some of the challenges. So there's an acknowledgement of that. But it's good, I think, to circle back and just to check that everything that we've put in place over the last 3 to 4 months is sufficient to address some of the challenges that are probably outlined in that letter from a national perspective. And it's just, I'll touch on that a little bit more during my committee update. So thanks for that. Thanks,
Ellen. Any other comments or questions for Shane in respect of his update? No? Okay, thanks very much. Can I move us on to our first substantive agenda item then, which is the Healthy Western update? Shane, I think you're going to take us through it.
No, I believe Paula was joining us, but I'm happy to take us through it. Has Paula joined?
I haven't seen Paula, and it's by you on the agenda. So
yeah, no, it is by me with the agenda. I'm more than happy with that. But she was to support that. Okay, I'm more than happy.
Just so people are aware, and I think most people in the meeting will be. Paula is the general manager in Western Trust. Has been there probably for the last 18 months or so, hasn't she? Maybe 2 years. But and I think she's appeared at the board before to give us an update on progress with Western. Do you want to defer that item further down the list and wait and see if she turns up?
I think Stuart's on a call now, probably calling her. I'm more than happy to talk to, because I do chair the Healthy Western steering group, and I'm more than happy to talk to Jeff. But I think I'd rather give Paula her place as the director.
And she may have stuff she wants to contribute anyway, Shane, mightn't she? Yeah, so that sounds like a good idea. Why don't we go to the next item on the agenda then, which is the update on deliveries and localities. Hopefully, Kirsty's with us. Has she joined us? I think Kirsty was going to give us the update on localities. And she's one of our locality directors in the absence of Dave. Not doing very well here, are we?
Lucy's got a hand up, Jeff.
Hi, Lucy.
Kirsty's going to come in at 1.
Okay.
Here's Paula now.
Paula now. Okay. So. Well, let's go back to the Healthy Western update then. So, Shane, if you want to introduce it, then perhaps pass over to Paula. Hi, Paula.
Hi, Paula. So, colleagues, as you will know, Healthy Western has come here on numerous occasions, and most recently, obviously, we came about 6 months ago, maybe slightly longer than that, looking at phase 1 and trying to finish out phase 1. The paper in front of you now tries to set a bit of a strategic direction as to where we are going with the next phases. So what we've tried to present is actually what's happened so far in terms of the impact on SDEC, same-day emergency care, what has happened in terms of the investments so far, looking at frailty. So the paper, it looks back at what's happened, but also looking forward as to how do we make sure we continue on a path. So Paula, do you want to give a little bit of a quick briefing or quick summary of what the paper suggests, and then we can get into a conversation about it?
Yeah, thanks, Shane. Good to see everybody again. Believe it or not, it was over a year since we came with the phase one case. It was indeed. If we'd achieved all that in 6 months, Shane, I might have been even more proud. But anyway, it's still really good to be coming back and closing the loop, if you like, on the confidence expressed by this board just over a year ago, and making that investment into the phase one stage of really getting the Healthy Western vision fully underway. And it is important that we close that loop and give that assurance, as I hope you can see in the paper, and that we keep a focus on sustaining momentum, because regardless of what's been achieved, there is more scope to go further, but there are continued risks around sort of some of the resilience and the sustainability, particularly of adult medical inpatient services. And we know that they are not as equitable for the local population as they could be in terms of those specialty services and giving that access. And we also know that in terms of relevance for the local population, there's a significantly higher proportion of older people in the area, and we've got to tailor our services for the future to be ready to meet those needs. And I think in part of the discussion, Shane, I would like to come back to sort of our shared commitment to keep moving forward to that full vision. And we are ready and poised, ready to deliver the phase two kind of plans that are very much clinically led. We're ready and poised as soon as we can move those forward, start to secure investment, but be very realistic about the staged approach that we would take to that, so we can take a continuous improvement, test and learn type model. I do have some colleagues with me, and if it's okay, given we had sort of the 30 minutes, just going to touch on a couple of things in addition to the paper and the slide pack that you had, that just give a bit of added value, if you like, on what we have done and where we're going next with some of this. So I've got Judith Hernandez-Topino, who's the hospital director of Weston, and Emma Kate Reid, who's the deputy medical director at UHBW, also helping to lead implementation of Healthy Weston. So Judith, over to you.
Thanks, Paula. Hi, everybody. So in terms of where we've got to so far, a number of people around the room will have heard me talk several times, but and the pack has got some of the detail in, but just want to draw us really to the performance improvements across our emergency department. So a 20% increase in the patients seen within 4 hours, a 64% increase in the number of patients treated and discharged on the same day, and some really stark comparators between certainly the ambulatory pathways and the same day emergency care. If we looked at 2 years ago, so July 22, we'd see on average 120 patients through that ambulatory unit. We now see regularly in excess of 800. And an associated whole set of benefits based on flow, but also in line with that significant reduction in length of stay, which now brings Weston in line with other hospitals, and through that ever expanding kind of portfolio of services that are bringing a reputation gain for the hospital has come our ability to reduce our reliance on agency staff and improve our vacancy rates, and our nursing retention is the best in UHBW. So some really good places to kind of mark some success. We've still got work to do. We've still got ambition to be stretched. But our staff engagement score again was the best and benchmarks at the top for acute trusts. So again, all paints a kind of contextual story. I guess a couple of things that less so about the data in the pack, but from a quality perspective, I'd draw colleagues back to a position we were in before, certainly before the ambulatory pathways were really developed. But escalation space in Weston is limited, but had largely been in the form of beds in the surgical day case unit. And actually those beds had been used as escalation for 14 months consistently, with no attempt to kind of back out of them, or no ability to back out of them. And that really compromised some of the work that we were trying to do, of course, through our surgical pathways. But actually within when we were able to close that escalation space and revert it back to being a surgical day case unit, within a matter of 6 months, we actually saw that if you were a woman in North Somerset needing the care of the breast team, your average time on that pathway was well in excess of the national benchmark. But within 6 months of the day case being able to be used as its proper business, as I've described, that pathway was reduced by 20 days and brought such a significant benefit to women locally that were on that pathway just by us being able to do our business through the appropriate place in the hospital. So that's one of those descriptors almost that is a benefit that needs the narrative rather than numbers in order for people to really realise the impact of it. Paula, I'll hand back to you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Judith. So exactly that. This is all in the service of improvements for people and how it feels. And it's great to see that the kind of experience of people is equally improved in the feedback we get. So Shane, you focused there on the how we're looking forward and the phase 2 plans and the papers that you had. Give an overview of that. There is a full case behind that. It's been through various governance mechanisms, including the ICB Health and Care Professional Executive, and we'll come on to the Acute Health and Care Improvement Group. So that detail is there, but hopefully it gives a flavour of the next stages that we want to move through to really begin to increase the care that can be provided at the hospital appropriately for a shorter length of stay, up to 72 hours. But if you need that longer specialty input, then it's better in terms of equity to be in a place that has 24/7 sort of access to the full range of specialist care. And that's where the issue of sort of transferring patients if they needed that longer length of stay, that we've discussed in various places lots of times. But very mindful that that's something that requires capacity at receiving sites. So all of the interdependencies that come along with that are very, very, very evident. And I know that the ICB is sort of looking at a refresh or of the urgent and emergency care strategy. So our ability to create that capacity at other sites is going to be and need to be a fundamental part of how we look at that going forward. Emma-Kate, was there anything you wanted to draw out as our clinical lead for Healthy Weston, but also as a jobbing care of the elderly consultant?
Thank you, Paula. So just building on what you've said, I think, Healthy Weston phase 2 is really fundamentally about right-sizing our inpatient services for patients in Weston, so it reflects really the local needs of the population. And I think it's recognising that those patients that need specialist care, they get access to gastroenterology, respiratory, cardiology, whatever their healthcare needs are, so we can ensure sort of a high-quality, equitable service that we can deliver closer to home. And I think, as you said, Paula, those patients that need that 24/7 ongoing specialist care, that then we do have the opportunity to transfer them to the BRI or Southmead or Taunton if needed. But what we really want to do is provide an in-reach model, hot clinics, so that patients really can have specialist care closer to home if that's possible. I think it's important to recognise the patient population group that we do have in our Western beds, and we're going to dedicate 5 of our wards to elderly care patients, as we have about 65% of our current inpatient bed base are aged over 75 and frail. And this patient group really don't benefit from having a disease-orientated focus of healthcare. as a geriatrician, many of the patients that I look after have chronic diseases and are multi-morbid, and actually we need to be much better at delivering multi-morbid healthcare that is very patient-centred and holistic. And I think by having 5 care of the elderly wards where we can have an in-reach model as well ensures that all our patients get a high quality of patient care. And I think that sort of multi-morbid approach is very much reflected in NICE recommendations and also in the Chief Medical Officer's NHS 2023 report. I think so important to keep patients at the centre of everything that we're doing, and this patient population group can be best looked after by geriatricians working with their multi-professional colleagues and patients in partnership so that we can deliver that patient care close to home for them. I think it's probably important to reflect on some of the challenges that we've had in time recruiting and retaining consultant workforce in Weston, and I think it's been really positive to look at the different workforce models that are being looked at with specialist teams so that we can look, for example, with the respiratory team about how we might move to a more rotational approach, having in-reach hot clinics and rotating the workforce across the whole of UHBW, which will allow us to recruit, attract and retain staff. So I think that's being really positive, that work that's ongoing, and then we can continue to work in partnership, obviously, with our multi-professional colleagues and patients as well. And so it's really, Paula, just thinking about how we ensure equitable access for healthcare for all ages and maintain a really high quality service. But thank you. Hand back to you.
Great, Emma-Kate, thanks. So I hope that gives you a bit more of a flavour. I did want to point out that we're not just a hospital team around the table. We've got John Heather from One Weston join us, and Dave as well, Dave Moss. And obviously we've got colleagues around the table who are there as part of the ICB board today from Sirona and North Somerset. So I hope you've picked up the flavour of the thread of really sort of capitalising on the place of Weston's opportunity to build genuine integrated care. And there's some very exciting developments coming through there, and I'm sure John will pick up on those as we go through questions. Or John, did you want to cover anything now? Are you happy to pick up as we take questions? Yeah, you're on mute, or I can't hear you, so check that out before we get questions. Okay, well look, we'll stop talking, even though we could talk for Ireland about Healthy Weston, and let's get some discussion. Thanks.
Thank you,
Okay.
Paula.
Okay, thanks, Paula. And board members will have seen the paper, hopefully, and a chance to read it and digest it. I don't think you're asking for any decisions from us today, but you are asking us to note progress and future plans. So let me throw open to questions. So first of all, Julie.
Thanks, Jeff. Not a question, Paula, but some observations. And I remember when we sat here over a year ago, we talked about how important Healthy Weston was and its impact on the community as a whole. And I think I just want to share with the board that I was down in Weston recently. And if you look at our Weston team, which, 18 months ago, I think was our worst performing area in Sirona, they are now absolutely, they're the most established in terms of their workforce. Their agency staffing is down. We've got the GEMS team from Weston actually physically coming out regularly to sit with them, to work on their most complex cases, to stop admissions. Their P1 discharges home are absolutely hitting their targets, and that work that you're doing around the advanced practitioner, absolutely engaged in. So, we talked about it would have that impact. We may need to do the direct correlation, but certainly a visit down there and looking at not just those performance figures, but the way they now talk about being part of that One Weston service absolutely reinforces exactly what Paula was saying. So just a big thank you, Paula, because I do think it has been a big contributor to that. And the morale of the team down there is great. So I just wanted people to know Weston is now actually one of our top performers within Sirona.
Thanks, you, Julie. That's really helpful and really good to hear. So, Stuart.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I was just going to put a sort of metaphorical foot on the ball for it just a moment, and say there are so many. Well, if you think back, Julie just mentioned going back a year. If you go back 4 years, there are so many astonishing improvements in the numbers we have just heard that they almost just fly past you. And I just wanted to just reflect back that the journey that our organisation in Weston has been on, supported by any number of individuals, has been phenomenal, and the progress has been very significant. What I wouldn't want to happen is that we take our eye off the ball, to mix my metaphors horribly, because there's still significantly more improvement that can be made. And so, there's all sorts of data that I was sort of thinking, do I quote this one? I'm not going to quote any of them because Paul has just given such an excellent summary, but I would just flag up to people that it really does warrant a moment's reflection on the journey we've been on and where we've got to as a system to get to this point. It does warrant a bit of nodding and self-congratulation, but at the same time, the absolute need to continue to pursue the improvements that now need to be made. And when we talk about return on investment, this is a fantastic evidence, I think, of return on investment in terms of things like the reduction in length of stay, the accommodation of a very significant increase in unscheduled care activity without increasing escalation capacity and reducing markedly beyond all compare the number of times Weston's had to divert front door activity elsewhere. And I think we just have to really recognise that. So thank you, Jeff.
Thanks, Stuart. That's really helpful. John.
Thanks, Jack. It's probably a variation on the theme of what Stuart and Julie have just said. I agree. It needs to remain, this needs to remain a really high priority given the extent of inequalities in Weston. I was interested in, we recently at Fed had an update on UHBW and the kind of the people challenge. So I was aware that really good progress was being made, and it's incredible to see how far Weston has come in such a short space of time. And it's just, would you be able to unpick a little more specifically about kind of the innovation they've been using, anything specific about what you have done to make such rapid progress around, particularly around the people challenge? It may be one for Judith. I really kind of sat up. It was great, really great to hear what what you had to say, and just to kind of put it into specific context, I find really helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, and John, thanks for that. And it may be something that we come to want, to the likes of a committee and maybe explore that in a bit more detail as a case, learn good and bad. But there is a whole blend of things in there. And I mean, Judith has led a, in a particular kind of a whole cultural change agenda. And part of it is, I mean, international recruitment has been a key part of Weston sort of turning around its very challenged staffing position. But I think, as we talked about last year, you can recruit internationally, but you don't keep people. They will not stay and work in that hospital if they don't feel supported, have a valued job, have a career pathway. So I think that whole the whole approach and wraparound for when we do have people join us from other countries has been key. And then the culture of believing that there is a vision and actually having confidence that people are seeing that happen is something that you can't underestimate. So if you'd have walked into Weston ED 2 years ago, the vibe was very, very different. People didn't feel it had a future. It obviously affected their morale. It affected them staying and, and how they felt on a day-to-day basis. It's completely different now. The papers reference a 5 million capital investment, in expanding the SDEC and the ED emergency floor. Yeah, that's money, but what that represents to the people who work in Weston is there is belief in us. There's belief we can deliver, and there's belief we've got a future. So I think all of those factors are key. But Judith, do you want to add anything from leading this?
Yeah, thanks, Paula, and thanks for the question, John. I think it's a combination of all of the things that Paula's described, certainly from a cultural perspective, and that has continues, will be for forever more an ongoing kind of development challenge. But I guess some of the very practical realities of certainly the phase 1 investment, where of course there was a bit of uncertainty about whether we would manage that recruitment, is that investment also supported a kind of a grow your own kind of workforce. So we knew we wouldn't get 25 radiographers that were all sitting there with the right CT, MR skills. But what we could do was recruit radiographers and train them, knowing that the benefit of that training would come further down the line. So the mixed model of workforce, recruiting people with the skills right at the moment, but also investing in people to develop their skills, has also helped that value piece. And so I think it is that whole combination.
Thanks. Alison.
Thanks, Jeff. I think Ellen was ahead of me, but I've
Oh, sorry.
So shall I keep going?
Yeah, carry on. I'll bring you back in next, Ellen.
Okay, thanks. Thank you for the paper. It was an absolute pleasure to read, and I think those of us who've been around more than the 1, the 2, the 4 years have seen some of the real issues at Western over a very long period of time, and seeing it written down, it just warmed the cockles of my heart. I mean, it's just fantastic. And I think it's important that we do look back, because when we think about phase 2, how you've got on in phase 1 will give us the confidence or not about phase 2. And I think phase 1 has been and continues to be delivered. So that's really good. I enjoyed seeing the video with the staff as well. Just two questions. The risks that you outline in the cover paper are the 3 of them that you outline are external risks to Western, particularly. So no internal risk that you can see to the achievement of phase 2 coming up to the high level of risks. And I just wondered about that. And then the other thing, which I'm sure you've thought of, because the rounded leadership that's on show here about Western is really impressive, but the future proofing of what you're doing and the future proofing of the model and the sustainability, just to expand on that a little bit, on how you have scanned the horizon about what the art of the possible is in the next period of time. And I guess a question for us as a board is, when we saw phase 1 ages ago, we said, wouldn't this be great if we learned from Healthy Western and we could apply it in different shapes to the rest of our patch? And I guess we just need to make sure we don't lose sight of that. It might be different in a different part of our geography, but there will be some really clear learning here that we can and should, and maybe we have already translated into the rest of our geography. But I wanted to say thank you very much, and 2 specific questions.
Two big questions there, Alice. So if I just touch on the risks one, so I think, from a technical point of view, the risks are the risk to the Healthy Western programme, which is an ICB programme. So I guess it's not honing in on UHBW specific risks. So, clearly we have our own risk register. And frankly, I would say, the risk is the resilience of those inpatient services. We've still got a high number of temporary staff, if you like. Some of them have been with us a very long time, but they're still not permanent substantive staff in terms of consultants, particularly in some of those specialty inpatient services. And they are small numbers. So they are difficult jobs in terms of some of the rotas. So I think, the ability to create a vision that allows people to go through the transition phase, because you can't achieve gold standard overnight, but you've got to help people kind of go through that incremental continuous improvement test and learn. I think that for me is the biggest risk we've got today, but that's what the plans aim to address. So I hope that addresses that, but I'm happy to pick up with you if you want some more on that. And then the taking the learning and the forward scanning, I think that's absolutely sort of linked to maybe bringing John and Dave in, because frankly, I think the ability to work as one Western, and Julie touched on it at the start as well, that's where we've got the real opportunity, and some of that will be replicable across other areas, and some of it won't, because of the nature of the population and the different demands, etc. So I think we can definitely take some core lessons, but But John or Dave, did you want to mention the kind of One Western, the frailty vision and the work that's underway there, including getting recognised for the NHS Confederation by being selected as 11th out of 10, even though they only wanted 10, but they squeezed you in?
Sure. So, am I off mute now? Can you hear me? Yeah. Okay. So, yeah, I think I think it's very exciting. I mean, before I go on to that, I mean, as a GP in Western, the quality of the care of patients in Western is, you know, you feel it as a GP. You feel like you've got a real hospital on your doorstep now. You know, in days gone by, when I used to go to sort of GP meetings in Bristol, they would sort of turn their eyes up, my colleagues, that what we couldn't have available to us in Western, but that's really changed. So, you know, from my point of view, I get as thrilled reading the paper as the rest of you do. So that's great. In terms of the work with the NHS Confederation, yeah, so David and Holly Paris managed to sort of elbow their way into this project to look at the way that we're sort of developing our frailty service and making sure that it's not just sort of limited to, well, that the divide between primary and secondary care isn't there in the way that it could be. So I think, I mean, taking into account what Julie said, that, you know, Sirona and GEMS are working together, I think there's still a bit of a more of a fragmentation of the services around urgent frailty. It's complex, it's and the teams don't really know one another quite as well as we'd like them to, and they don't actually manage to make as much use of one another. It's a very complicated environment, you know, NHS at home and you know, the Frailty ACE offer, all the things which are great, but making the whole thing work in a way that allows us to maximize our potential. So the thing about Western is our locality footprint, referring into one hospital, allows us to have some very exciting possibilities. But we still need to get the teams knowing one another better. And the work with the NHS Confederation is to see if we can actually improve the quality of out of hospital care around frailty, looking at the various interfaces that we have. And yeah, I think that's going well, and I would expect to see some really significant developments and improvements.
But Paula, I'll bring Ellen in next in a second, but it's just, I guess it's useful to reflect here and perhaps a challenge, which I think you'll probably pick up, which is when we took a decision 4 or 5 years ago as a board in UHB to merge with Western, that came as a decision which was a commitment to thinking as a system in patient interest, not in organisational interest. And that was a big decision at the time. You know, you know, when I say as the chair, I had a lot of people come to me, not in the board, but certainly one-to-one, to say this has the potential to really damage the performance of UHB, University Hospitals Bristol. And actually, the whole point was this is about patient care in Bristol, North Somerset and South Gloucester, not about individual organisations. So I guess the challenge going forward is a lot of what I'm hearing now is absolutely brilliant. So from where I sat 5 years ago to where we are now is unrecognisable. But Western can't be, now you might tell me I'm wrong, but Western can't be seen as a separate entity. It has to be seen as part of the system, which is acute care and wider care to our patients going forward. And so I'm just conscious that as we go forward, if we single out Western, is that to the detriment of other care in the system? Now, I'm happy to be shot down on that, but I just wonder whether you've got a view on it.
So I don't think those things are mutually exclusive at all, being part of the system, but continuing, because what I mean, you know, not to go back to the kind of very negative position, but you said there were a number of drivers behind the merger, and there's a number of drivers behind the whole Healthy Western vision, and that is that unless Western is a successful acute hospital relevant to local people, the system is not going to thrive. It's not even going to survive. And some of the issues that Stu referred to there, in terms of had Western not been able to absorb over the last year, 18% increase in non-elective admissions, and that's excluding zero length of stay. So that doesn't even include the kind of people who get turned around in less than a day. If they hadn't been able to absorb that, you know, what would have happened? The ambulance diverts would have been even increased. You know, the impact on elective care, on cancer recovery, etc., would have been massive, Jeff. So I think, you know, the answer is Weston is not like a separate thing. It is fundamental to the success of our system.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. And, you know, I think that reflects the conversation we had as a board 5 years ago. But actually putting that into practice is sometimes it's the buffers of organisational interest. And I think us as a board in the ICB, I'm not hearing anybody talking like that. So it's really positive. And I think it's just great, isn't it, to hear where we were, you know, where we were and where we are now is just remarkable. Let me bring in some questions then. Ellen.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. And Paula and team, can I just thank you so much for this presentation and for the information included. I think this is an excellent example of an investment, a return on investment, and performance milestones along the way. So you've been able to outline some real great successes. The breast day unit pathway being reduced by 20 days, that's fantastic. And also patients being seen from 122 to 800, which I believe was outpatient. So some fantastic stuff there. Two questions. One, are we taking the learning? So I think Alison's already mentioned that. And I think Dave's not here today, Shane. So my question would be, has this learning been taken into the work that we've just been doing on flow? So that would be one question from Weston. And my second question would be, have you had patient feedback and citizen feedback, and does that match the success that we're seeing in some of these results? Thank you.
I don't know if you want me to answer the flow one, because I'm not sure exactly what the work is that you're talking about, bringing it in, but I can say that, you know, colleagues from across UHBW represent all of the learning that comes from West, and that comes into all of the urgent and emergency care work. So that, you know, that goes without saying. And there are different drivers, you know, so some of the lessons will be the same, and others will be, you know, the difference between, you know, Weston didn't have an SDEC, a same-day emergency care service at all, or very, very limited. You know, Judith described the massive change there. The pathways have completely changed, you know, looking at how GPs can direct into that same-day emergency care service, how ambulance teams can bring a patient and go direct to the same day, bypass an ED where that's safe to do so. So other hospitals, bigger hospitals, will have had experience of SDEC and be building even further on their learning. So it is shared. And I think the second question is absolutely key. So I don't have all of the figures in front of me, but the inpatient national survey scores for Weston had significantly improved. I know this isn't, it's had significantly improved in the last set of scores we've gotten. And as I referenced earlier, Judith had referenced the family and friends test, specifically in ED, and that improvement. And then as part of, you know, the whole Healthy Weston programme and how we do things, you know, Health Watch are fully engaged with us there, and we're part of the Health and Wellbeing Board in North Somerset, etc. So we get the community and the wider views and inputs through that as well. But yeah, with the measures we have for people actually saying it feels different for us, we do get that, but we always need that feedback. We don't get it perfect, and we've had some high-profile complaints, and we're open and transparent about that as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paula. Ellen, perhaps Shane will pick the issue up of flow when I come to him. So I've got Joe and then Dominic.
Mark is really keen to be here despite election day to support this paper. I think it's been a fantastic journey, and having been in post for over 5 years, I've kind of seen that journey personally. The system working, I think it's a really fantastic example of system working. So I guess I just wanted to support but say thank you to the system for the investment. I guess I'd also like to take the opportunity just to reflect on your point, Jeff, because yes, the organisational approach is important, but also so is a place-based approach. And I think this is a terrific example of where the reality for BNSSG is you have one of the most deprived sets of wards within BNSSG in Western. And then in terms of tackling inequality, which is key to BNSSG, but also North Somerset Council, it's inevitable that taking a place-based approach, working as partners, focusing on our residents on a local basis is the way to actually galvanise, I suppose, that improvement journey. So I think some of the learning is absolutely replicable, but like Paula, I suppose sometimes our places are unique and therefore not all of it will be replicable because different places need different approaches. Just really want to show my support for Healthy Western too as well, and hoping that at some stage there will be more capital investment, because I think this does demonstrate, I suppose, the benefits that have been achieved, and a big thank you for the system for making the decisions in the past to invest. I do agree with Paula as well. I think there were views and perceptions about the hospital which have completely changed, and that has impacted positively on not just the staff working there, but collectively with system partners and indeed our residents as well. So really positive support from the council, and ongoing support as well, hopefully from the system in terms of how Western can deliver for the system as well as for Western and North Somerset.
Yeah, that's a great point, Joe, and I think it reflects the conversation we've been having for years around it. But just the way it's turned the corner, everybody told me 4 years ago you couldn't do this, and it's a testament to those people you've heard talking today as to how they put their shoulder to the wheel and really made it happen. So it's not this is not a small thing to do. Just the culture of changing that within UHB has been positive. So. Well done. And Joe, thanks for your comments. They're really helpful. Dominic.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, hugely impressive piece of work, having a vision combined with strong leadership, combined with collaboration across different organisations and hard work within organisations, plus a bit of extra resource, just makes the world of difference in a locality. I've supported this all along, but I've also always put a slight, not a caveat on my support, but a reminder along with my support to say, I think there will be a time when we need to mobilise a phase 4, which is looking at mental health in the same way. So quickly to paint a picture of mental health services in Western. On the one hand, we have really strong, capable leadership and a class-leading model around what we call the MINT teams, multi-agency integrated network teams, that has been much visited nationally, much written up, that sort of thing. And yet, if you look at our older adult services, they're significantly under-resourced compared to population, compared to, say, Bristol. Similarly, if you look at the ward that we have there, it achieves one of the shortest lengths of stay and the best flow and the lower level of patients who are clinically ready for discharge of anywhere in the trust. And yet physically it is one of the worst environments that we provide inpatient care on and desperately needs a makeover. And if you look at our CAMS service, which we took over in April 2020 in the middle of wave 1 of COVID, which had 10 CQC enforcement notices, it was now being rated as requires improvement. It was inadequate. Sadly, that took the rating down for the overall service, but they did commend us on the turnaround and said, we didn't want to give you requires improvement, we didn't quite get it to good yet. And yet 4 years on, we've been unable to appoint a single substantive consultant to that service. So I think there's something about how we put a spotlight on mental health services in Western in a similar vein to the way that we've done it for physical health services. And people were saying, well, can you extrapolate from this experience and apply it elsewhere? Well, we can apply it in the same locality, just to a different set of services. And I think we get a really significantly better set of outcomes. So I hope that's a helpful comment.
Thanks, Dominic. Points well made. Probably not for Paula, perhaps more for us as a board and for Shane going forward. So, Shane, over to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone. First of all, the purpose of the paper was to look at the the benefits that have been achieved in phase one, etc. And I concur with everything everyone said. I think the challenge for this board moving forward, the challenge for the system, not just the board, is that to be able to move into phase two in a financially constrained environment, which we are, there's a limited amount of money the system has. How do we sustain the benefits, turn the benefits into releasable cash benefits to invest in the next phase? And that's the big challenge, because the amount of resource we have in our hospital environment, we know in a medium-term financial plan, we know what it looks like. We know that, we certainly, Stuart and Maria, we haven't sat down and said, look at the extra tens and 20s of millions of pounds are coming into our hospitals. We don't have that. And yet we know this is the right thing to do. And therefore, so for example, we've had real success with SDEC, but we've still got a lot more admissions into the hospital because actually the demand at the front door of all our hospitals has gone up. The assumptions would have been that actually lower length of stay, cash releasable beds, get investment back in again, and then you get on to phase two. It doesn't look like that at the moment. That's not a criticism, it's just a reflection on where we are. Therefore, we have to work out what the funding model is to try to get to phase two and get to phase three, because at the moment, as a system, as a whole, Jeff, we don't have a checkbook that says, let's now write the check for the next phase. But yet everyone in this room has said this is the right thing to do. And therefore, there is something about the role in the group model, about how the group of hospitals look at the total resource of hospital and says, how do we best distribute that to make the best impact for our population? So it's not giving a question or an answer. It's just putting it out there, important for the board to understand, as much as this has been brilliant, and it is brilliant, and we mustn't let it stop. We don't have an automatic path to, and this is how you fund the next phase or the next phase. So there is work for us to really understand how we can do that. Now, there might be a bit of take a little bit, take a little step, take a little bit more, take another step. There's also an opportunity through the group model for efficiency overall in the group, and therefore some of that efficiency to become the cash that's invested into the future stages. So I think I'm delighted where it's got to, but the reality on the screen has to also be, Chair, that we don't suddenly have a checkbook we can write a check for. We've got to find a financial solution to this, because we can't let this stop, but we don't automatically have a solution at the moment.
Shane, I think it's a good point, and perhaps a better way of what I was trying to phrase around Western as a separate entity. I think with the joint chair on the group model now in the acutes and the joint chief executive role, that will come into greater focus anyway, because that gaze should be across the whole of the acute system and not separate entities. I think the point is well made by everybody, though, that the injection of effort and activity and focus in Western is a really good example of how you can turn what people describe as a poor service to a really good one. So yeah, it does demonstrate, if you have got some money, it does make a difference. But I don't think it was the money that's made the difference here. I think it's the will of people to want to do things differently, and we've heard that from so many presentations here. But
it's a bit of both, Jeff. Bit of both.
Their point's well made. Maria, then Stuart, then I'm going to move us on if I can.
Okay, I just wanted to say that, of course, the group model and the clinical strategy actually will play a big part in enabling this as we go forward. But of course, there are the interfaces with so many other services, including SWOST and various patient flows, as we consider what needs to go where. I mean, I just think it's really important that we are focusing on the fantastic work, the consuming its own smoke actually at Western. We talk about return on investment. The counterfactual would be, what if they weren't reducing length of stay in the way they had? What if they weren't able to see this huge 18% in place increase in activity? So that there is a return on investment, albeit not cash releasing presently. I suppose one thing I would say, and I know there's some fantastic work going on demand and capacity across each of our three areas at the moment. We often plan, don't we, for the here and now, as opposed to where we're going to be in 10 years' time. So I think our ambitions really need to be about the populations we believe we're going to be serving in the future as we model, particularly around the patient flows and how support services around that are going to work. But absolutely take the point that the group will have a part to play, a significant part to play, and the efficiencies that come out of that will obviously be profiled against any system investment required too.
Thanks, Maria. That's really helpful. Stuart.
Thanks, Jeff. I was gonna reply in some way to Shane as well, and a lot of what Maria's said, I think, is where I was going to go. I think the two things I'll say is, firstly, I think it's fair to say we absolutely recognise as trust going into a group about to be together as a group, that there is a responsibility on us to support the next phase of investment in Western. We absolutely get that, but there's also the fact that Paula mentioned the 18% increase in unscheduled care activity, excluding zero length of stay in the last year. In 2 years, it's been 35%. Now that is a massive increase to accommodate. So and of course the requirement, which is spelled out in the Healthy Western case for the no criteria to reside in D2A work streams to deliver against aspiration. And I suppose for me, therefore, there's a dual responsibility here, isn't there? There's that system responsibility in terms of how we all work together to manage that demand and flow, and just to put that, we recognise alongside that our organisational responsibility to do likewise in terms of the delivery of that future. So it's fundamentally all of us that have to do this, hence why it's here, I'm sure, but I just wanted to really be clear on that.
Yeah, and Stuart, I think it's, again, point well made, and that's the way we've approached this from day one. I think, when I was sat in UHB, that conversation was the acute hospital has a significant part to play in making the difference here, but this has to be seen as a system effort, not as an acute effort. That was the line we took from day one, and we're consistent with that. And I think that's the point to be made. Can I just say thank you to Paula, Judith, Emma Kate and John for coming along and updating us. It is time well spent. I mean, I think the paper says what it needs to say about the direction of travel, and on the recommendations it is about noting the direction of travel and where we're heading. But I think the time you spend with the board here does make us much more informed when we're making decisions about particularly the financial case as we're going forward. So a big thank you. Anything anyone else would like to add on this item before I move us on? Okay, lovely. Thank you very much, and well done again. So can I move us on to the update on delivery in localities? Dave isn't with us today, but Kirsty is, and Kirsty's one of our directors. So Kirsty, over to you. I think the paper's been circulated for board members to see, but I think you were going to give us an update, particularly on the localities review.
Yes, that's right. Thank you, Jeff. Yeah, for those of you who I don't know, I'm Kirsty Corns. I'm the locality director for South Gloss, which I job share with Steve Ray. So I've just got a few slides which pick out the main headlines from the paper. So I'll attempt to share those now. Hopefully people can see those up. So essentially this the paper in your pack went to the Integrated Care Partnership Board last week for approval. So as Jeff said, today is just providing an update on the progress of the review, and from an ICB board member's perspective, it's sort of to note the content of the report, but we're not here asking you for any decisions today, which you may be pleased to hear. So in high level, the decisions that were made at Integrated Care Partnership Board last week, the terms of reference for the review was approved, and board members will recall that the terms of reference was a collaborative piece of work that was co-produced with numerous partners and was led by Ros Cox when she was in her strategy role within the ICB. The outline timeline was approved, and we'll look at that in a little bit more detail, but essentially running from July this year until the end of November, the 28th being when we'd report back to ICB Board with the recommendations and the delivery plan. Funding model was agreed between the Integrated Care Board and our 3 local authority partners. We will be running an expressions of interest approach to appoint an independent provider to lead the review on behalf of our system. So although Steve and I are coordinating this element of the review, we won't be leading the review for the obvious conflicts of interest if we were to do that, being part of localities. We had approval for a core working group approach. So I think taking the learning from the ICS strategy of having a small core group that will drive the process and hold the oversight to make sure that the review hits its milestones and is delivered in accordance with the terms of reference. And then there will be, what we're envisaging is some much wider stakeholder workshops, likely throughout sort of September, where we will look to get as many people's views as possible on what locality partnerships need to be for our system. So the context of the review is very much set around the integrated care system strategy and our BNSSG Healthier Together 2040 service plan. So as a system, what do we need locality partnerships to be to contribute to the successful delivery of both these strategies? I won't go through the terms of reference in detail because people will have seen it in the paper, but essentially it's going to look at what's been working really well and what have we perhaps struggled with. And it was really interesting being able to sit in on part of the Healthy Western item, which just sounded incredible. And I remember when Healthy Western Phase 1 started 7 years ago. And I think a lot of what we'll be looking at are things like how do we align ourselves strategically, and looking at the sort of combination, I guess, of the culture and resources. What do we need the culture to look like within locality partnerships to support the system? We'll be looking at the management model of locality partnerships, and then also the governance within the system, considering the health governance, but also the broader health and wellbeing board governance. The review will take an appreciative inquiry approach. I won't go through this in too much detail, Jeff, because I'm really conscious of time. But essentially, I think that the key part of appreciative inquiry is saying we have done lots of work in our system over the last 6 years, looking at nationally what other parts of the country are doing, internationally learning from people working at place. We've done reviews of locality partnerships, and we've also done work setting out what we think locality partnerships need to look like. So we'll be using all of that as the starting point for the review and building on that. Oh, sorry, you don't need to see my reminders. And I think it's really sort of encouraging stakeholders when we have the review to really sort of lean into that courageous leadership that we talk about within our strategy and within our system, and an appreciative inquiry approach lends itself to encouraging that. So from a very high level timeline, Steve and I are hoping to get the expressions of interest out next week. That will go to, we've had lots of names of providers have been shared with us through partners, so we'll send that out. Very light touch, looking for sort of a couple of pages really on how the providers will deliver the review. And we'd look to appoint the provider by the end of July. And then August will largely be planning the review, the workshops, but also the desktop exercise, looking at all the work that's been done to date and all the learnings around locality partnerships. Within July, we'll also look to set up the working group, or sort of the core group that will oversee this review. We've got names coming in from ICB board members and from our system partners at the moment. So as soon as we've got that group, we'll be able to share that with people. Reference the funding model, there were 3 options that were taken to Integrated Care Partnership Board, and the option that was agreed amongst partners was a population-based proportionate contribution from the Integrated Care Board and our 3 local authority partners. And we've estimated the cost to be in the range of 15 to 20,000, which again aligns with an expressions of interest process for provider selection. Touched on the working group, and there's just sort of an example on this slide, but essentially we just want to be really sure that we represent the 3 domains of system leadership, so that's local authority, VCSFE and health, and again taking learning from the working group that really drove the ICS strategy work forward. So we're asking members of the working group to meet likely sort of maybe fortnightly face to face during the time period through till November to keep this moving forward, and then it would be the responsibility of the working group to present the outcome of the review, the recommendations and the delivery plan of who's going to do what as a result of the review to the Integrated Care Partnership Board. And probably worth noting that these aren't the only people that will be involved. There will be workshops and meetings and other ways of making sure we really engage with a wider group of stakeholders as we can. So I'll just pause there, Jeff, and hopefully I've got you a little bit of time back, but very happy to answer questions.
Thanks, Kirsty. I'm sure there'll be a few questions. Shane, it would probably be helpful for you to give some context as to how we ended up with the review. I think Kirsty's touched on it, but I think that'd be quite useful for board members, and then I'll open up for questions.
Thank you, Chair. I think the time was absolutely opportunistic. We had our running cost allowance challenges, obviously in the ICB. And that led to a case where we had to think how do we structure what we do as an ICB to support localities, and that meant there was a reduction in some of the resourcing of the structure. That then sparked a series of conversations. Well, actually, what is the best way to run a locality? What really is it meant to do? So the spark that started this review was one of us looking at our running cost allowances. However, this is so much more important than that, because the small amount of running cost of a locality is nothing compared to the amount of resource that goes through a locality. And I don't mean money, I mean people and the way people work in a locality. So the timing was just right to say, look, these things don't belong to the ICB. They belong to the locality themselves. Let's have a look across and what is the best way to run the locality. So I'm very excited about this, because I think this could be a step change in our thinking about how localities are run and really how we get the resources through them. I say it's not just about money, but get the whole mobilization of resource in a locality.
Thanks, Shane. And I think it's quite timely as well, isn't it? As we started to mature as a system, it's a really good opportunity to look back at what we're really trying to achieve and who's doing what. So, yeah, points well made. Jaya.
Just say thank you for this. It is very exciting, this particular one. And also good to note that we've got VCSE colleagues involved with the steering group. I wonder whether or not that means that we can get an assessment of the maturity of our locality partnerships in terms of the overlap between where our VCSE Alliance members are and who's engaged with each partnership. Because I kind of think that, if we wire it all in, that's where the power of scale comes in. So yeah, quite geekily excited. Thank you.
That's a good point, Jay. And Fiona, we've probably got a lot of that through the VCSE Alliance already, haven't we, about how people are feeding into the system?
Absolutely. So we've already had a conversation about how we're going to engage with this process. We've got a meeting next week. So I'll be getting in touch with Kirsty about our nominations, but also just to say I've been on the Woodspring board for the last 4 years, and VCSE is absolutely integrated. And in relation to locality, it is our conduit into community and place. And so much good work has already happened that wouldn't have happened if we didn't have those locality partnerships in place. So, I think that this is absolutely the right time to do this review. It's got my support, it's got the support of the VCSE Alliance, and I'm looking forward to what comes out of it.
Thanks, Fiona. Any other comments or questions for either for Kirsty or for anyone else, really? Well, we just thought it'd be useful for you to be updated on it and what the work that the ICP is doing, because we have recently changed chair as well. So John O'Neill, who's the cabinet member for health and wellbeing at South Gloucester, is now chairing the committee, and we rotate it every year. So, and then I sit as the deputy chair on there to make sure that we've got the continuity. But we'll keep you updated on how that progresses, and I think the findings that come out from it, I think you'll probably find quite useful back here at the ICB. Any other questions on this item before I move us on? Okay, thanks, Kirsty. Nice to see you as always. See you soon.
Thank you all for your time. Bye.
Next item on the agenda is a primary care system access report. Dave's not with us, so I think Jenny's joined us and Bev. So I think you're going to pick up this item between you. So where do we start, Jenny or Bev?
I'll say, shall I say a quick word of intro, Bev, just very quickly, and then I'll hand over to you. So this is an update to the board. It's 1 year on in terms of the implementation of the System Access Improvement Plan. And as you can see from the report, there is a significant amount of work that has gone on in that year. What I did want to stress is this is a 2-year programme, so we're halfway through. There is still work to be done. But in the report that Bev's going to take you through, it will cover access in its broadest sense. So not just about appointments, but all the work in terms of online access, NHS app usage. And we've also considered this both in terms of access to pharmacy and dental. So we've given you a broader scope in terms of thinking about primary care access. Bev, did you want to then take us through the key points of the report?
Yeah, thank you, Jenny. I am just going to share just a couple of slides so you don't have to just look at me all of the time. Yeah, I'm Bev Howarth. I am the Deputy Head of Primary Care Development, for those of you who don't know me. And just by way of a little bit of a kind of a reminder, NHS England published the Access Recovery Plan last May. All systems were required to develop local plans. The board approved our plan last November. And like Jenny said, this gives an update of year 1 of the 2-year programme. And just to reinforce, it is a kind of a significant piece of transformational work for our practices, hence the kind of 2 years and likely more. So just as a bit of a reminder, the aim is really to try and tackle that 8 AM rush, improve our population's access to getting their healthcare needs met at the right time, right place, and by the right person, which we know improves outcomes. It also aims to decrease the inequity across the system, and finally help to kind of support the workload for our practices and put in place those more effective and efficient processes to do that. There are 4 key areas, and what I'll do is run through them as a bit of a reminder and then just pull out some of the kind of the key highlights as I go. So first area is empowering patients. So this is very much about increasing the use of the NHS app, increasing the number of self-referral options, and expanding our community pharmacy. The NHS app has really increased its functionality over the last few years. You can review your records and test results, manage your appointments, order repeat prescriptions, and it allows you to receive text messages from your practice. That is free for the patient, it's free for practices and the ICB as well. As we are in open session, I will take this opportunity to kind of reinforce at this point, if you are able and if you want to, I would encourage you to sign up for the NHS app, but more importantly, remember to turn on your notifications. In our area now, we've got 60% of the population that have done that have signed up. We're really pushing that notifications bit as well. But also moving on to kind of our community pharmacies, they are doing more and more as well. We are a national leader for the Community Pharmacist Consultation Service and hit 7,000 referrals in January. Also in January, this service started to expand, so our population can go to the pharmacy for 7 other minor ailments, things like insect bites, shingles, sinusitis, sore throats, urinary tract infections. And we are really really working hard to continue to increase referrals across all kind of practices. In the paper, you'll see those rates. So we're trying to kind of bring all of those up across the patch. The second area is what is called implementing new modern general practice. This includes the rollout of digital telephony, easier digital access, care navigation and continuity of care. All of our practices are on cloud-based telephony, and currently we are at 85% of our practices having additional functionality, so call waiting and call back. And we're hoping that all practices will have that by the end of this year. And this is what we are hearing really positive feedback from both our practices and our patients, because it's taking that stress away from that 8 a.m. rush and not being able to get through to kind of practices with those functionalities. So where it has been embedded, it's really starting to make a difference and a change in culture and behaviours for patients, which does obviously take time. And the practices have seen a difference too. So kind of happy patients, happy staff. All the usual ways to access practice are still available, and we've done a lot of work to try and really promote that message through practices and through wider communication routes as well. So patients can still call, walk in, but also use digital mechanisms. And we know that not everybody can or wants to use digital mechanisms, but actually for those who can, all of our practices over the last year have reviewed and chosen their preferred online consultation provider that fits the needs of their population. And we've seen a rise from 35 to 92 online consultations per 1,000 population as we're getting slicker at dealing with them and have the right processes in place. And we are continuing to basically support our staff and patients to use this technology through our digital inclusion team. Care navigation is really important to ensure that the needs of the population are met in a timely manner. There's a lot of talk about same day access. This is around, rather than getting an appointment on the day unless there is a clinical need, it's really around making sure that we address and patients know the outcome of what their request has been to kind of practices. This also involves making sure that actually all staff within the practice, as well as kind of patients, know where to signpost to for self-care, if that is what patients want, the pharmacy, a telephone consultation face-to-face with the appropriate person. And all of our practices have kind of completed that training in this area and really value this as part of ensuring the kind of the continuity of care as well. The third area of focus is building capacity. Last year, we increased the number of appointments by 4% to meet the national target. 84% of those are consistently within 14 days, above the kind of the national average. And we've also increased our workforce by 3%, which is good news, but is mainly for our kind of multidisciplinary team roles. We still have, so physios, care coordinators, social prescribers, we still have a significant challenge in terms of our GP and nurse numbers. So we are continuing with a range of initiatives for retention and recruitment to try and support this, but also at the same time that continued communication and education about what the additional roles do, which is a big change we absolutely know and continues to be for our patients. Lastly is what is termed cutting bureaucracy. So two main threads to this. Firstly, the CMO team have established a primary secondary care interface group. This is basically looking at continuing to build relationships between practices and our acute hospital departments, making sure that the communication routes are right and are in place, decreasing barriers to kind of patient pathways, and also with a focus on planned and urgent care area. So far the group's updated the access policy, started to make improvements to discharge summaries, so everybody has all of the information that they need, including the patient, relating to medications, sick notes, recall processes, and just making sure that the patient doesn't have to keep going backwards and forwards between kind of clinicians. And secondly, there has been a bit of repurposing of funding to provide support for practices to do this work. And I'm pleased to say that all of our practices were successful in receiving all of the available funding. Our primary care networks developed their own plans, working with their practices, and we review those on a 6-monthly basis. And the progress demonstrated meant that we could release that funding. And obviously it's not just the plans we monitor, we also have a long list of things that we kind of keep an eye on. Access is complicated. There isn't one thing in isolation that we would particularly look at. We have to look at the kind of the full picture and kind of keep an eye on that. And if there are practices that kind of consistently come up as being outliers, we have a brilliant practice support team that reaches out to help. And you'll see in the paper, we've seen a significant reduce in the number of those practices from when we started this work to where we are now. So we only have a handful that we are continuing to work with. It's not just activity and performance we monitor. Our practices and PCNs have mechanisms to listen to our to our population. Obviously, the patient survey is annual, and this is what gave us a bit of a baseline that we triangulated with all the other feedback sources that we have. But our practices and PCNs have put in place more timely mechanisms to feedback and support action. This ranges from kind of focus groups, reaching out to communities, reinvigorating patient participation groups, the friends and family test, and support from our Health Watch colleagues, along with kind of responses to an increasing number of MP inquiries on behalf of the population. So we do hope that when the next survey comes out that we will see an improvement, but we do recognise that there is still not the equity across the kind of the system. We are getting there, but this is big transformational change, and like I've said, this does take time to put in place, but then obviously to embed and sustain. But we are, and as ICB and our practice are continuing to kind of listen to our population to make sure that we are continuing to do the right thing. So still a lot of work to do, and the kind of the challenges will continue for our practitioners and our system over the next year. Like I say, year 2 will focus on embedding and sustaining the work done to date, and trying to continue to increase that equity across the system. I will stop sharing there and pause. Hopefully that gives the board a little bit of an insight into the significant amount of work that our practices have been doing, but I'm very happy to take some questions.
Thanks, Bev, and thanks, Jenny. That was really thorough and has taken us through a lot of activity there. But it'd be helpful to check with one care, really, Ruth or John. Is John? Yeah, John's still with us. From your perspective, how does that resonate?
Thanks, John. Go on, Ruth, you go first.
Oh, well, I was just going to say thank you, because as I would expect from the primary care team, it's like a really comprehensive and thorough report, and I have very little to complain about. So thank you very much. I guess my reflection is Bev was just talking about what a big transformational change this is. So I guess my reflection is, if we've seen an increase in activity of 4% with decreased numbers of GPs, decreased numbers of nurses, and people changing their ways of working at the same time, that really is a considerable achievement that we should I'd like us just to pause and reflect and recognise that. Yes, of course, there is still more to do, but there's been a huge amount of work. And I think there's just 2 bits I would just pick on, if I may. There was a reference in the paper about 15 to 20% of appointments being from patients on a long waiting list. I think the national figure is around 38%, so I suspect it's a little higher than that. and that churn and is something that I think we would all like to work on, because that's an opportunity for us as a system to have more capacity in general practice that it would be good to take advantage of. And just to reflect on the interface work, which I think started last September, which has been good, but maybe hasn't had quite the traction and the rapid progress that maybe we hoped at the start. So lots of goodwill and lots of commitment, but hasn't quite translated potentially into the action. But not to take away from the fact that it's been a busy year. Thank you, Bev. Thanks, Jenny. It's a good report. Yeah. So thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. That's really helpful. John?
Yeah, thank you. I would echo all that, and Jenny and Ruth continue to do a fantastic job and work very well with us in partnership. And thank you for that. I would just got to be careful today, but just to reflect on one of the comments that you made earlier on, Bev, in the presentation. Happy patients, happy staff. I'm not sure that's a phrase that you would hear echoing around the practices across BNSSG. I think that whilst this paper is presenting some really positive stuff, it does reflect that there is a significant increase in activity that's happening in general practice, increase in online appointments, increase in telephone consultations, but also on top of continuing sort of business as usual, and the staffing levels, whilst we're seeing increases in the healthcare sort of assistant professionals with physios and mental health nurses, pharmacists and things, we are seeing a significant pinch on front of house general practice staff still, and that is having a huge impact on access. It's having a huge impact on internal performance in practices, and the cost of those services is escalating despite the constraints in our resource. So I think it is a positive reflection on a lot of the stuff that we're achieving, but I wouldn't want it to give a sort of false impression that everything in primary care and general practice is rosy and working fantastically well, because we do have significant issues of resilience and affordability of services, and our ability to pay our staff is becoming increasingly challenged.
Thanks, John. I think that gives useful context as well. So, I mean, you shouldn't take away from the great work we've seen here, but there's a bigger picture, and I think you've articulated that well. Steve?
Yeah, thanks. And it's great to see the innovations that are happening across primary care and the progress, accepting clearly what's just been said. One of the things I just wanted to add was that there is now set up, and it's a combination of the Health Innovation Network, West of England Health Innovation Network, and UE have established a primary care lab, and that is designed to really deep dive and test bed innovations in general practice. So we will be providing in this region access to facilities that will hopefully continue the innovations, because the future is going to be about how we can innovate and change the way in which we deliver care. So this is a great example of our health community coming together and innovating, but then building on that and then looking at ways in which we can roll out and prioritize investments going forward. So I just wanted to say a big thank you for the work that's already been done. It's the starting place, and we'll continue to build on it.
And Steve, you're linked into staff in the ICB on that, aren't you? With Dave Jarrett and okay, well, great.
Yeah,
Thanks.
It's all joined up, which is fantastic.
Good. Ellen.
Thanks, Jeff. Just quickly to Steve's point there, Jeff, it would be really helpful at one point to possibly have one of our meetings in this lab, because I'm hearing lots of really good things, Steve, about the innovation going on here. So I just think, to get our sort of ourselves look into the future, that might be a good opportunity at some point. Anyway, can I just say thanks for the report, Bev and Jenny. Some really fantastic work there. You mentioned, I think, how we're listening to patients, but do you have any early indications from our patients that they are seeing some of the benefits of this work? And my second question is on bureaucracy. You mentioned that that's one of the 4 pillars of cutting bureaucracy. How are we measuring our success in this? Thank you.
Thanks, Ellen. And yes, early indications were what I touched on earlier, specifically around the telephony, around call waiting and call back as well. And we put a couple of examples in the paper of quotes from practices who have been those kind of early implementers at the start of the year, where they've really noticed the kind of the difference in terms of workload, but also change in patients' behaviours as well. So both the staff and the patients as well. And that was kind of specific reference to the happy staff, happy patients, happy staff. That was kind of confined to that. I probably should have kind of been clear on that, but that's some of the feedback that we kind of have had from our practices. Your question is very pertinent, actually, because that's what we've put forward to the primary secondary care interface group around actually how are we measuring the tangible differences from the work that's being done. As Ruth had alluded to, we've had kind of like, let's get this group established, lots of forming and storming, and it's really feeling like it's kind of changed a bit of a corner at the moment around kind of very much clarification of what is achievable, because as you can imagine, as people find out about a primary secondary care interface group, everybody tries to layer on lots of different things into this group, so it's really tried to hone down on what its actions will be, and that is what's currently happening around how can we measure the difference that we're making. And what I will say is it's not easy, and that's why it's not in place at the moment. It's still very much work in progress, but we absolutely recognise that we have to do it.
Thanks, Bev.
Thanks, Bev. Chair.
Thanks, Jeff. Awesome report. This is like so full of stuff and very lived experiences too. 2 observations or questions and sort of pleas, I guess. One of them in terms of the NHS app. It's not clear to me from the outside what functions are available to our GP practices and what is being taken up. So, you know, in terms of booking appointments and things, I still have to ring up, or I still have to fill out an online form which closes off at a certain time during the day. It's not clear across practices what's happening and what the barriers are. So that would be one to look at. And also it might help in terms of waste. So at the moment I have a whole mountain of like thousands of paracetamol at my parents' house because the prescription just keeps going. Imagine an app that says, please stop this now. I kind of wonder how much is happening that we just can't stop because these are automated processes. So just two excited please.
Do you want to pick that up, Bev?
Thank you. Yeah, and this comes back to kind of where our practices are in their transition, because the NHS app has a load of functionality within it, but actually what practices are working through as part of this is all the processes that sit behind it. So actually for the example that you've given, the online booking, we've got a high percentage that have actually put that in place. But on one hand, you're talking about being able to book online. On the other hand, our practices are moving to that effective triage process. So the online booking has had to start with actually what in theory could be clear and obvious for specific areas and consultation needs. And so that's why it's not a free-for-all, you can book anything on there.
Of course,
we've put these processes in place for a reason through triage, care navigation, but actually there are some specific areas where actually booking your own appointments that you're used to doing is it kind of helps the process, and that's new to kind of some patients as well.
Thanks, Bev. Alison?
Yeah, thanks, Jenny and Bev. This paper has been reviewed at Primary Care Committee at its last meeting and all its meetings, and we go into a lot of detail around some of the questionings which have come out today. I think because we have Jenny and Bev and primary care colleagues around the table at PCC, it is very clearly a slice of what real life is like without having to live it. So there's absolutely no way that the garden is rosy. We get very clear first-hand experience of what it's like in primary care at every meeting. So John, just to reassure you, there's no sense of that. This, I think, is a really important work stream, not just for primary care, but the data is really good, but also for us as a system to be successful in what we want to deliver. And I just wanted to pick up, just because I know Joe Medhurst has spent a lot of time on this. The secondary and primary care interface is a question I ask at each PCC. How are we getting on now? And I know Jo, if she's here, I would like her to come in, because you've been trying to create the right relationships from which to then create different ways of working. And I think that's an important, you've always told us that that's a really important part of building the group together. But in sense of just responding to Ruth and actually it feeling slower, what's your sense of what you think that group could achieve now that you've built those relationships, Jo?
Oh, thank you, Alison. I said I've got to say I haven't actually attended the group. Geeta's been leading on this with the deputy CMO, so I can take some of that out, and I'll ask if it's okay with you. Rather than giving you a generic answer, I'll give you a specific answer as an action. But I'll have a chat to her first. We did agree a set of actions, but they are complicated, complex actions to enact. Also, in the midst of again, a load of other change around the system. But let me come back to you with a specific answer, Alison, because I can't answer you accurately at the moment.
And that's great, Jo. We've got a primary care committee later this month, and I think it would be helpful to have some sort of update then, because it is a cultural. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
As Ruth said it, I thought I'd just go and deep dive into that and see if there's anything I can do to catalyse. I will do that.
Great, thank you. And just a final comment, Jeff, on. Really good to start to see some comprehensive data sets around primary care. It's a really good baseline. I think Steve talked about it being a good foundation. It's really good when you can start to have data that you can build from, which we're starting to see. And the committee was really keen on making those connections about the data we see and how it feels to be a patient in the practices. And we just don't want to lose sight of the connections of those two as well. So we recognise this is a really important piece of work, and the amount of work going on behind the scenes by both Jenny and Bev is extraordinary to support this.
Yeah, thanks, Alison. Deb.
Thanks, Chair. And just to build on what Bev was talking about in terms of the digital elements, and particularly the public-facing ones, you'll remember that as a board we've signed off the digital portfolio, which includes some of the developments around the NHS app. So that's the pieces Bev talked about. There's a lot of work to do behind the scenes to make sure that practices are ready to change their business processes. But also we need to make sure we do that piece about digital inclusion to make sure that people are ready. Now, Jaya, you don't need that digital inclusion piece, but others will. So we just need to make sure that flags up, because it does have a big connection. You know, Jo and I, having done a bit of work around health inequalities, the digital inclusion element is actually much more significant around inclusion than I think maybe we've really appreciated as a board. So it's really good that we've got that ability to connect it all up. And then the other thing to say is, while we're on this connection with people and their journeys, is the work that our acutes have been doing around doctor, so that you can look at your appointments in your acute trust and you can decide whether or not you can't make it, and DNAs go down and the productivity goes up everywhere. That is connecting into NHS app as well. So it gives us a really exciting opportunity to align the health and care journey potentially for the individual. So I just wanted to flag that, because I think what the work that Beverly and the team are doing is so important in terms of this foundation for our digital first journey for our population.
Yeah, thanks, Deb. And I think the point Alison made is a good one, which is that this does get a significant airing at PCC and the conversation of Primary Care Committee and the conversation there. But we thought it was useful to bring it to the board for update to make sure that the wider board has had that conversation. Maria, you put a question in the chat around digital telephony. Has that been answered, or Bev? I don't know whether you can see that in the chat. Maria's asked, is there any concerns about the rollout of digital telephony and the capability and capacity and networks to support it?
I think Ruth's kindly responded to that in the chat already, but actually at the moment it's been a massive piece of work, and actually what we've tried to do and the team have tried to do is really share the learning from the early implementers who've got this up and running, and kind of that message around, okay, this is the lessons we learned. It took some work to get this in place. It's not just technology, it's all the processes and it's the communication to patients. However, actually some of the funding has supported the kind of the build up to that, so that practices can kind of plan accordingly for when it goes live. The only challenge really, and why we've not got everybody onboarded so far, is that we've had practices on different contracts with different providers, and actually, you know, we want to use our taxpayers' money effectively, and actually we've got some contracts that are still playing out, so there's a lead in time to the rest of the practices actually moving over to the full technology.
Okay, thanks Bev. I'm conscious this paper is just for by way of update for the board. Is there any other questions or comments anybody would like to make? Okay, big thanks to both Bev and Jenny for your time. I think you've thoroughly taken us through it, and I'd echo everything everyone else has said. Is, you know, clearly your engagement across the system and also the effort you put into it has been outstanding. So well done. Thanks very much. Okay, can I move us on then to the updates from committees as the next item. So Ellen, can I come to you first, and then if you want to bring in Joe, I don't know if Michael is online as Rosie's deputy, and or yes, Jenny as well as for Dave. So over to you first, Ellen.
Okay, thanks Jeff. So I think Caroline and Michael are on the call. Michael will update on quality, in particular healthcare infections, and Caroline on any performance issues that I don't touch on. At the last meeting in June, just recently, we discussed performance and quality, a lot on no criteria to reside. We talked about productivity and GIRFT, safeguarding Q1 report, and ADHD and autism waiting list, which we've already discussed today at a closed meeting. So we discussed no criteria to reside in some detail, which is so important as it impacts on the quality of care that we offer our patients. It affects urgent care performance and much of elective and our waits. At the beginning of the year, Shane talked about no criteria to reside and flow as being one of our greatest challenges at a system, and that it is our greatest priority, or one of the. So during the meeting, Dave Jarrett, who is not with us today, but Dave updated the committee on actions that have taken place over the last couple of months, focused on the back door and front door, including a very large workshop with I think 60 system colleagues in the room, and Dave confirmed buy-in from all chief executives in the system executive group. So all in all, some really positive moves. Actions included focus on frailty and assessment coordination and transfer of care hubs, as well as many other areas. Dave stated that he expects to see a steep reduction on the graph by September 2024, so that's in a few months' time. There were, however, some concerns from committee members that the target was very ambitious, and probably as chair of Outcomes, Quality and Performance, I share some of those concerns. But there's no doubt that the system is working incredibly hard to resolve this situation. As we stand today, our position on no criteria to reside is similar to the position that we've been in the past year when compared to the national picture. And the next meeting of Outcomes, Quality and Performance is on the 26th of September, where a stated target of 15% has been confirmed. So with that, we can see the scale of the challenge, but we also know we're working really, really hard to achieve that. But I'm really pleased with Shane's opening comments this afternoon, that CEOs are meeting tomorrow to reflect on the actions probably that their teams have already committed to, and be assured that we will receive significant improvement. So what I would ask, my one ask, is that the next performance delivery board, Shane, I'm not quite sure when that is, but this is sort of a key agenda item that then can then feed into our meeting in September. So that's basically no criteria to reside. So a lot of focus, but quite a big job to do, I would say. The other areas we looked at were productivity and GIRFT, where we were joined by Nicola Smith, Philip Keeley and Alistair Johnson from NBT and UHBW, who updated on some of the great work that's going on productivity. But again, that will sort of feed back into the no criteria to reside and flow work. We also looked at segmentation, where we received a quarterly letter from Elizabeth Omani that confirmed that BNSSG will remain in segmentation 3. The key areas that we are required to focus on and improve are our cancer FTS, elective 78-week wait and 65-week waits, ADHD and autism waiting list, virtual wards, inpatient learning disability and autism, and also our agency spend. Many of these items were discussed at the meeting, and we'll continue to take these agendas going forward. So those were the key points, Jeff, from the meeting. If I could just quickly bring in Michael to just update on healthcare infections, and also then Caroline on any other performance points you'd like to make.
Thanks, Ellen. Michael.
Thank you. Thank you, Ellen. Thank you, Chair. So I'll give a concise, focused review on healthcare associated infections, and the best slide, colleagues, to look at if you're on the diligent pack is page 107, or if you've got the hard copy, then it's the first HCAI slide, which shows you can see there's some charts there about the healthcare acquired infections that we monitor within the system. Now, just for context, it's really important, I think, colleagues, to stress that at the moment we are in a national picture of seeing an increase of healthcare associated infections across the board. Across the nation, we are seeing that, and there is a multiplicity of reasons for that are being explored at the moment. And for example, they include the fact that we have an aging population, higher complexity, waiting lists. A good example, for example, is Clostridium difficile. At the moment, we're seeing increases nationally because, particularly in men, because of a higher prevalence of men in the community having catheters as a result of prostate conditions, and then also waiting to have prostate surgery. So it's multifactorial. So giving that context of a national increase of infections, I think is important when you look at that slide. And you can see for our system that for all bloodstream infections, we have seen an increase this year on that rolling 12-month trend. To add a further context to that, though, it's really important, I think, whilst not to be complacent, it is important that we acknowledge the benchmarking for this for our system. So, for example, as you can see, even though in Clostridium difficile we've seen an increase in the last few months, we still benchmark as the best performer in the Southwest in terms of trying to keep those infections down. And that goes for our benchmarking for England as well. And for all infections, we do actually benchmark in terms of our performance better than most systems within the Southwest, apart from, as you can see there, MRSA, where we are higher. In fact, we are probably the least performer in terms of where we are. Having said that, again, you can see in the last few months, we may be turning the curve and MRSA infections are now going down. In terms of governance, we've got working groups for all of these infections, and we're not just working as a system, but we're working with the region as well, and we're doing this as a regional piece of work, because I think it's really important that we pool resources in terms of learning. We have really good, strong governance within BNSSG, and we've had really good feedback on NHS England on that. We have, for example, a system infection prevention management group, which has excellent engagement from all our providers within the system. And so this is all being tackled very collectively. So while, in summary, as you can see, infections generally are going up nationally, within our system, we are trying to keep a hold on that as much as we can and have benchmarked very well, apart from MRSA, where we need to do some further work. Happy to take any questions or expand on any of that. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Michael. And Caroline, did you want to come in?
Yeah, so thank you, Chair. Just going to cover by exception, really, as I'm conscious of time for you all. So for urgent care in particular, we are slightly under operating plan for ED 4 hour, hence the importance of the work that Ellen's already mentioned in terms of system ambitions and linking the front door performance to our back door. To take heart, but it's not condoning our performance. We are still the best in terms of type 1 in the southwest, at 63.3%, against an overall average of 66%. Otherwise, in urgent care, we've actually done really well over the last week in terms of the IA action for the junior doctors. And our other point of concern is around our virtual ward, in terms of just trying to make sure that we have got the right recruitment into trying maximising that service. For elective, again, we've got future risks in terms of our industrial action. And it's always unfortunate, isn't it, that the way the industrial action fell, it always hits perhaps what was already a hotspot. So in particular for some of our longer waiters, and in relation to the complexity of patients around our DEP provision, we're still really good as a system in terms of our diagnostics, and that is the amount of work that really took place in the last financial year. We do have some hotspots, but I'm not overly concerned about those in relation to DEXA and non-obstetric ultrasounds. I think we will get that performance back. And I think that CDCs, yes, we have had teething problems. We do with any new service that we put in, and this was slightly more complicated because we're working with a private sector company. We've got staff coming, you know, into in-health, but potentially from outside of England and from all over the world. But we have got more modalities online now. So we've got plain film X-ray back online, which, as you can imagine, is a large volume. But we've also got ultrasound and echo as well. So we've got some good volumes going through, and some of those teething issues are starting to sort out. The biggest issue for our CDCs is really the digital solution, which we think we've got away, but we need to test that. So we might still be a couple weeks of working as we are, which is putting a real burden in terms of our local admin teams in our acute trusts. FDS, we have deteriorated a little bit. This is data in April. We are seeing a surge in some of our referrals, and unfortunately we've almost seen the skin increase earlier than we'd even anticipated. We have got a teledermatology project now, which is probably rolled out to about half of our PCNs. We really need to try and make sure that we get that rolled out in full for this financial year. SWAG have been very supportive, and we do have funding to enable us to do that. Again, we will have further risk through the bank holiday periods that we see in May, and also industrial action. For mental health, it's not a bad picture. You'll know from the report that we haven't got national data because there have been some digital issues for month 1 and 2, which isn't overly helpful for us. But the one bit that will stand out in terms of indicators are children's and young people's access. Again, some of that's actually data recording issues, and again, I think there's a good chance that we will recover that target in this financial year. For community, we've now just had, we've got extra attention really from NHSC in terms of bolstering our operating plan that we've already resubmitted a couple of times now, in terms of actually looking at long waits in particular, for 52-week waits. So we will pick that up. It's fair to say that Serona are on track in terms of their overall waiting list, and we are working with Serona in terms of just looking at some of the waiting list management processes. And as Ellen's already mentioned again, there's lots of work going on around the D2A, the workshops that happened in relation to the system ambition work. And we are getting to a point now where it will go to system execs tomorrow, but also our performance executive meeting tomorrow morning in terms of trying to realise some additional capacity, in particular for P1, which will help to start deliver that ambition. And then finally, just for children's, we've got an agreed 52-week wait trajectory. Again, that will be a really big feature in terms of that revised operating plan submission for community. But we know that that number is still too high, and you'll all be familiar with the transformation work that's ongoing in relation to our neurodiversity. We will have like the accelerated pilot, I'll call it, which will perhaps come in from August. However, it won't impact materially, I think, on that waiting list initially. And we have got some good waiting list validation going on in terms of community paediatrics as well. And then just finally, in your performance report, we did have a separate paper for learning disabilities. There was some concerns, and Ellen mentioned this in relation to the segmentation letter back from Elizabeth in relation to our performance, in particular in patient beds. So we are probably double where we need to be. We have got some long stayers that we know that will be coming out, which I think will potentially reduce that. But the most important thing really is probably the work that the ODG are doing, as well as the strategy work and the away day that took place in June, which is really about trying to have more influence and voice from our patients, thinking about our pathways in community. We know that we've got our new LDA unit coming online this financial year, which will potentially give us more beds. But the most important thing is we get that community wraparound services really. And we've just submitted a plan to NHSC in relation to, they're calling it an inpatient transformation quality plan, but it includes LD&A, and it's not all about inpatients, so rather misleading title. However, that work will really make us think about how we support patients greater in our community and how we can change that to stop, I suppose, some of these inpatient admissions that we are creating at this point. So just that's what I'm going to say, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Caroline and Michael. Ellen, there's a lot in there, and a lot of that's been rehearsed previously at the Quality Committee. The paper's there as well for board members' information and detail, so if you do want to dig into that in any more depth. Can I check if people have got any questions on the updates we've just been provided with, or comments? No, okay. Well, thank you. It's very, very thorough, and I think you've covered a lot of ground. It sort of demonstrates really how much is flowing into that committee. It's a lot of depth. So good. Thank you. So People Committee, Jaya.
Thank you, Jeff. So much shorter overview for us. We continue to make significant headway into the reduction of agency usage across the system. With the focus on nursing and medical staffing, there are organisations that are currently working on specific plans to tackle these. The Workforce Strategic Oversight Group has, of course, been established to ensure that there's strategic system leadership around it this year. And we also have the NHS at Home Staff Movement MOU, which has been created to support the hospital at home workforce. That MOU has been negotiated across provider partners and trade union colleagues, and it's been signed by partners and implemented with effect from 10th June. We're also receiving updates regularly from system partners, as noted in the monthly workforce monitoring report. Organisations are continuing to make headway on sickness, turnover, retention. Colleagues from One Care and Social Care are also providing updates, which gives us an idea of how we can learn across our providers in terms of areas of shared risk. Well, that's it for me.
Okay, thanks, Jaya. Joe, anything do you want to add?
No, only to flag really that there are 3 sets of minutes, and that obviously includes our ICB Focus People Committee as well, where we have obviously been coming to the end of shaping our future and the need to reduce our running costs. Successful all-staff event in May, and now obviously how we continue to mature the organisation going forward and shaping and changing our ways of working, which is I think a testament to the hard work of the executive team as well as the senior team. Yeah. Just also to say that obviously we were anticipating some information and intelligence on the long-term workforce plan requirements for this year and in 25-26, delayed due to the election. So hopefully not much longer of a delay in knowing what those numbers will look like for the coming year, and we will be obviously responding to that. That's it, Jeff. Thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Joe. And a lot of work gone into that change program, as we talked about previously. Any comments or questions for either Jaya or Joe around the People Committee? Ellen?
Yeah, it's not a question. It's just an observation. Myself and Alison sit across both our own committees and also the People Committee, and I just see the benefit of that. For example, I identified through my committee that virtual wards and CDCs had workforce issues. Joe wasn't really aware of that, and I was able to make her aware of that. And I just think crossing committees with this kind of crucial information is really, really important. So I just wanted to make that observation, Jeff.
Yeah, and we need to think about that, don't we? Because I think there's the issue of your capacity as NEDs, but also the session we have bi-weekly around cross-fertilisation across committees, and then of course I will sit on all of them anyway. But Joe.
So just on that one, Alan, by way of feedback, I guess. So thank you for the action. It is included in the minutes and obviously will be followed up. But just for your awareness and assurance, so I reached out to the lead for that work, and actually we've set up a workshop on how we're going to help with the recruitment into that space. So it has absolutely galvanised the activity that it needed. So that cross fertilisation was really, really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Any other questions for Jay or for Joe, or observations? Okay, thanks very much. Steve, Finance, Estates and Digital.
Thanks, Jeff. And of course, this is one of those committees where it does cross everything. And I recognise that clearly is something that the executive is doing, and what we try and do as non-execs is to pick it up in our committees as well. So financial balance is key. And we set out at the beginning of the year that this was going to be a tough year for the NHS. So the things that we've been really focusing on, in part, are reported in the April and May minutes. But I'm just going to give you a quick update in terms of where are we as we look forward. The first thing is trying to balance financial balance, health inequalities and improvement, because as we begin to identify activity within areas that currently are not gaining access to services, our costs are rising because they haven't necessarily been noted before. So there is a pressure in addition to the financial pressures that we already know about. What we've been attempting to do is to do deep dives across our organisations. So we've done the acute trusts. This time UHBW spent some time with us understanding cost savings. And that's been very useful to be able to get deep into organisations to understand how they're supporting the system in terms of cost savings. Clearly, it's around efficiencies, productivity improvements and innovation. And today in the meetings, we saw some of the fruits of innovation that will start to play through and help our finances. However, we are tracking already in month 2, month 3, variations that are going to be investigated further, with deeper dives coming back to us in July, so that we have a better understanding of where we're tracking and what we need to do in addition to make sure that that financial balance is delivered. I think the other thing that we are also recognising in the investments that we are making, one of them around data and data use through an intelligence centre, is going to help us understand where need is and how we better use evidence and data that can help us then structure the way in which we deliver services going forward. So that ultimately will help us understand and get on the front foot in terms of our investments. I think the other thing that we're trying to make sure is that obviously achieving financial balance needs to be alongside delivering high quality and improving efficiencies at the same time. And that in a world where finances are tight across the entire system, both in the NHS and in the unitary authorities, is going to require some really fantastic joint working, so that we operate in a way that allows us to make the decisions, to create the headroom, to then invest in the things that will reduce the health inequalities. And that's what we're focusing on in our boards, and cross-fertilising obviously information across our other committees. I'm taking the papers as read, and I'll just invite Sarah to come back on anything that she's worrying about at the moment.
Thanks, Steve. I think the one bit I would just draw board members' attention to, and it's on, so if you just go to page 185 on diligent, and it's page 2 in the sort of system finance report, it's just those key messages of the month 2 position. As Steve says, we know that this year is going to be challenging, but at month 2 we're 9.5 million off plan. That's predominantly driven by 3 issues, which is non-delivery of savings. So we're at 60% of the planned efficiency savings have been delivered at month 2. And the other significant issue is the elective recovery and where we are against that in terms of the level of elective activity that's been completed. We have the Performance and Recovery Board tomorrow, and those are the 2 agenda items. The 3rd issue is around medical staffing agency. So we've seen really positive improvements in agency spend relating to nursing, but there are still some significant issues in medical agency. So those are the 3 issues. Like I say, at Performance and Recovery Board tomorrow, we've got a focus on the sort of both this overall position and particularly looking at elective recovery.
Okay, so thanks, Sarah. Deb? Nothing? Okay, and we had a lengthy update last time, didn't we, around digital? So
Steve mentioned the piece about the intelligence centre, which was the core piece for digital this month.
Great. Okay, thanks. Anything, any questions or comments from anybody around Steve, Sarah, or Deb's update? Okay, thanks. I mean, it's very comprehensive as always. Primary care, Alison.
Thanks very much, Jeff. There are 4 sets of minutes attached. The first 3, the board has had a verbal update previously, so I'll just focus on the end of May meeting, May the 21st. It was a good meeting. Supporting papers showed the extent of the work that's going on that subject, and the teams were commended on that, actually. What came through very clearly was the need to prioritise what should be delivered in this year, because a general theme of capacity constraints came through. I think committee were very keen to support prioritising what can be done, and therefore almost, if you like, giving permission for things not to be done in year 1, because capacity seems to be a significant issue. In terms of specific, there's just 3 areas. There's a known risk on the corporate risk register, which board has been reported to board previously, around the capacity of the South West Dental Commissioning Hub to support us effectively. 2 main areas of concern around dentistry. One is effective contracting arrangements and support to practices, and the second is around delivery of the dental strategy and the ambitions. I know as a system we're very ambitious around what we do around dentistry. I know the issue is being actively worked on. I know it's including Shane, and I know that hopefully since our last committee meeting in May, Shane was going to have a chief exec meeting with the lead ICB Somerset around the commissioning and hub and what we can and can't do. But at the time of the last committee, it was a concern. So just to note that we talked about the system access improvement plan, which we've already talked about today. The second thing of note is that committee noticed an increasing trend of incidents reported from primary care, particularly primary medical services. Notable that the incidents reported are predominantly around other providers' issues rather than self-reporting issues in primary medical services. There's also at committee, there was a low sign up to the new safety framework by practices. This involves a real cultural change in general practice, signing up to the new safety framework. So clearly committee were concerned that if practices weren't signing up, was there an issue there around that? We needed to understand the themes around incidents and consider any deep dives if we needed to, but also to make that connection with Ellen's committee, because we certainly don't want to duplicate or omit. So clearly Ellen and I just need to keep in touch, and it's brilliant that Ellen's on primary care committee as well. Committee is very keen to understand what will change in assurance terms when we do have the new safety framework, and what will we see, what will we receive as a committee in insurance with a new cultural approach to safety. So lots of work in progress there. And then the final thing that I would say is that we saw the primary care assurance framework. It was good to see that. It's there's lots of work underway to provide assurance, and this is a return that goes to NHS England. It's also very helpful for us internally. It does sound as though there's a high level of reporting to NHSE on the assurance framework. It's taking up quite a bit of time. I think as an assurance document, it would be good, and I think the suggestion from committee is that the primary care assurance framework could come to board in due course. The committee obviously will keep a detailed oversight role, but it may add to an assurance lens to the board. And that's all I would suggest from committee. Unless Jenny, have you anything that I've missed or you'd want to add?
I would just add, Alison, so in terms of the primary care assurance framework, that will give us a lens in terms of have we got the right governance and controls to discharge our responsibilities around delegated commissioning. And that's the full range of delegated commissioning. So that includes general medical as well as pharmacy, optom and dental. So I do think that in due course, it would be helpful for the board to also be assured, albeit primary care committee takes that detailed oversight. The other thing I would just like to update the board on, so we, in terms of the dental strategy, I thought it would just be helpful to let you know that we are now in a period of engagement in terms of the draft dental strategy. We've done some active work with our local authority public health colleagues. So a big thank you to local authority colleagues for your partnership approach to this. And they've helped us to update the dental strategy. And we've been working with the VCSE Alliance on engagement. And we've also had some active participation through the North Somerset Health Overview Scrutiny Committee on the draft strategy and also the Bristol Health and Wellbeing Board. So there's some really good collaborative work to take that to the next level before we bring that back to board as a finalised version later this autumn. And yes, that will require significant capacity to implement. And those are the ongoing conversations we need to have, both with the hub in terms of the contractual elements, but also to what extent can we deliver some of that transformation regionally, but also what are we going to need to implement locally. So that's also what we're reviewing now in terms of the team resource to enable and support that delivery.
Okay, thanks, Jenny. Shane?
Yeah, just to confirm, as Alison's point, myself and David Jarrett did meet with John Hickman, Chief Executive of Somerset, and also Steve Sylvester, Director of Commissioning in that area, to discuss the pod. I think we came to a clear conclusion that there was a lack of understanding, a lack of clear line of sight, is the best way of putting it, between the resources that they had and the services they provide and the things that we can expect as a recipient of those services. And we have an agreement that we will work up a memorandum of understanding between ourselves and the pod. So it's very clear in terms of what resources are available and what we should expect, and also what they should expect of us as a partner as well.
Thanks, Shane. I'm sure Dave will do that, but sharing that with Alison would be really, really helpful for us. Okay. Any other questions to Alison or Jenny? No? Okay, thanks very much. Audit and risk then, John.
Okay, thank you, Jeff. We've got the minutes of the April meeting, and the focus of the April meeting was really around confirming that the work plan for the last year had been largely delivered, and approving the various work plans for the current year. We also met last week, and those minutes will come through in due course. And the meeting last week had a focus really on year end. So we received the counter fraud annual report, which was green and largely a very, very positive submission. We also received the finalised annual head of internal audit opinion, which was adequate and effective, but some items were flagged as requiring improvement, and plans are being developed to address these. We also received the external audit report, and again there were some areas of weaknesses that were identified, and again plans are being enacted to address these areas. And finally, we approved the annual accounts, the annual report, and the various supporting statutory submissions using the delegation agreed by this board at its meeting back in May. So that's it by way of update at this time. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks, John. Any questions for John around audit committee? And that's all been shared with partners, isn't it? We've had all that through on diligence, so you should have been able to see what those accounts are looking like and the audit reports. Any questions or comments from anybody? Okay, thank you very much. Thankfully, Kirsty's done my job for me around the ICP update. You heard the update earlier around that meeting was dominated by the review and what that looks like. Still a very well attended meeting. Ingrid Barker attended that for the first time as well, who's the new joint chair for UHBW and MBT, which was really well received, I think, that she was at that meeting. Apart from that, is there any comments or questions that people would have around the Integrated Care Partnership Board? No? Okay. So before I move to any other business, we have got a few people online as members of the public. As I said, I haven't had any questions tabled in advance, which we would normally do. So catching us cold, we may be able to answer a question if anybody's got one. Or alternatively, we can respond to that in writing. So can I check if there's anybody online from the public who wants to ask a question? No hands, probably all out voting. Okay, thank you very much. In that case, any other business? No, so it's enough for me just to say the date of our next meeting is the 5th of September. But we're probably going to have an extraordinary meeting sometime in August, just for a very short period, probably 20 to 30 minutes. Shane, I think there's one item we'll want to discuss on there, isn't there, as the extraordinary board. So I'm conscious that if we haven't given you a diary mark on it, that is sometimes difficult. If you can try and be there, we'd appreciate it. If you can't, understandable. But I think it's important that the item is actually shared with the board. And then as we move into the new year, we are obliged to have an AGM. So we'll be tagging that onto the back of the next meeting as well. So, but you'll get advance notice on all of that before we actually progress into it. Shane, anything else you want to say before we finish?
No, nothing at all, Chair.
Okay, well, thank you everybody for your patience today. I know it's been a long day. We've covered a huge amount of issues and ground. I actually think it's been a really, really good discussion. I hope you feel the same. But I shall see you all personally at the beginning of September. Have a good summer. Can we believe we're heading out of it, not into it? And for the rest of you, I will see you shortly online. I've no doubt about it. So see you all soon. Thanks very much for today.
Thanks, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Chair. Thanks all. Bye.